In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share something with you that fundamentally changed how I think about aging. And I've been studying this for over 30 years. Let me start with a statistic that stopped me in my tracks. According to research published by Harvard Medical School, approximately 40% of adults over the age of 65 experience significant mobility limitations. That means difficulty walking, climbing stairs, or even getting up from a chair without assistance. Now, here's what's fascinating. In certain regions of Japan, particularly in Okinawa and parts of the Nagano prefecture, that number drops dramatically. We're talking about communities where 80 and 90-year-olds are not just mobile, they're thriving. They're walking to markets, they're tending gardens, they're playing with their great-grandchildren on the floor. What are they doing differently? For years, we assumed it was genetics. We assumed it was their diet, which is of course exceptional. We assumed there was something fundamentally different about their biology. But the research tells a different story. And when you understand what I'm about to explain, you'll never look at movement the same way again. You see, I've spent decades in clinical practice and research, studying human locomotion, neuromuscular health, and the aging process. I've worked with thousands of patients, from elite athletes to individuals recovering from debilitating injuries. And what I've learned consistently contradicts what most people believe about staying mobile as they age. The secret is not spending hours at the gym. It's not expensive equipment. It's not sophisticated exercise programs, though those certainly have their place. The secret lies in something far simpler, something that's been hiding in plain sight for centuries. Today, I'm going to walk you through 6 specific movements that elderly Japanese individuals practice, not as formal exercise, but as natural parts of their daily lives. These are movements that Western medicine has largely overlooked, movements that don't require gym memberships or special training. And I want to be clear about something. These aren't miracle cures. I'm not going to tell you that one simple trick will reverse aging. That's not how science works, and that's not how honest medicine is practiced. What I am going to tell you is that research from institutions including Stanford University, the University of Tokyo, and rehabilitation centers across Europe has consistently shown that these specific movement patterns, when practiced regularly, are associated with remarkable preservation of mobility, cognitive function, and independence in later life. We're going to count down from number 6 to number 1. And I've structured this deliberately because as we progress, each movement becomes more important. Number 1 is something that, when I first understood its significance, genuinely changed my approach to patient care. So let's begin. Number 6, the deep squat rest position. In Western societies, we sit in chairs. It's so ingrained in our culture that we don't even think about it. We sit in cars, we sit at desks, we sit on couches. From morning until night, we're seated on elevated surfaces. But in many parts of Japan and throughout Asia, the deep squat is a resting position, not an exercise, a resting position. People will squat while waiting for a bus, while having a conversation, while preparing food. Why does this matter? Research from the biomechanics laboratory at Stanford has demonstrated that maintaining the ability to achieve a full-depth squat is one of the strongest predictors of functional independence in aging adults. When you can no longer squat fully, you begin losing the ability to use toilets independently. You struggle to pick things up from the ground. You start needing assistance with basic tasks that once required no thought. The deep squat position requires ankle mobility, hip flexibility, and adequate strength in the quadriceps and gluteal muscles. It maintains the health of the cartilage in your knees by taking those joints through their full range of motion. It keeps the hip flexors from becoming chronically shortened, which is one of the primary causes of lower back pain in older adults. Now, if you haven't squatted deeply in years, please don't attempt this suddenly. Start by holding onto a door frame or a sturdy piece of furniture. Lower yourself only as far as is comfortable. Over time, weeks and months, work to increase your depth gradually. The goal is not to perform a perfect squat tomorrow. The goal is to restore and maintain a movement pattern that your body was designed for, but that modern living has systematically removed from your daily existence. Number 5. Walking on uneven natural terrain. This might sound almost too simple, but bear with me because the science here is profound. When researchers at the University of Tokyo analyzed gait patterns in elderly populations, they found something remarkable. Individuals who regularly walked on natural, varied surfaces, dirt paths, gardens, cobblestones, grass, showed significantly better balance, proprioception, and reaction time compared to those who walked exclusively on flat, paved surfaces. Why? Because your brain is engaged completely differently when the ground beneath you is unpredictable. When you walk on a perfectly flat sidewalk or a treadmill, your nervous system can essentially go on autopilot. The same signals, the same muscle activations, the same patterns, step after step. There's minimal challenge to the vestibular system. There's minimal engagement of the thousands of nerve endings in your feet that evolved to interpret complex terrain. But when the surface changes, when there are small stones, gentle slopes, textured earth, your brain must constantly adapt. Your foot must respond to feedback in real time. The small stabilizing muscles around your ankles, knees, and hips must activate continuously. This is neuroplasticity in action. This is why 90-year-olds in rural Japanese communities maintain balance that rivals people 30 years younger who live in urban environments with perfectly smooth surfaces everywhere they walk. Now, I'm not suggesting that someone with significant balance issues should immediately start hiking on rocky trails. That would be dangerous, but can you walk in your garden? Can you spend time on grass? Can you seek out surfaces that provide gentle variability? This simple adjustment, walking on natural terrain several times per week, has been associated in longitudinal studies with up to 30% reduction in fall risk over 5-year periods. Number 4, the slow, controlled transition from floor to standing. Here is a test that has been validated across multiple research centers, including extensive work done at rehabilitation hospitals in both Germany and Japan. If I were to ask you right now to sit down on the floor and then stand back up, without using your hands, without using your knees for support, without holding on to furniture, could you do it? This specific ability has been correlated so strongly with longevity that some researchers have proposed it as a screening tool for all-cause mortality risk. A Brazilian study published over a decade ago found that adults who could perform this movement had significantly better survival outcomes over a 6-year follow-up period. Why is this so powerful? Because this movement requires everything. It requires leg strength, it requires core stability, it requires balance, it requires coordination, it requires flexibility in the hips, knees, and ankles. It requires your brain to sequence a complex series of motor actions while managing your center of gravity through space. In Japan, traditional living involves regular transitions to and from the floor, eating at low tables, sleeping on futons, sitting on tatami mats. These practices mean that elderly Japanese individuals are constantly performing this floor-to-standing transition throughout their entire lives. In Western cultures, we eliminate this movement almost entirely. We have couches, beds at elevated heights, dining tables with chairs. We engineer our homes to avoid the floor completely. If you cannot currently get up and down from the floor without assistance, that's okay. Start by practicing with a chair nearby for support. Lower yourself to a seated position on a firm cushion rather than the floor itself. Use the chair to help you stand. Over time, reduce your dependence on external support. This movement practiced regularly maintains capabilities that many people lose decades before they need to. Number 3, slow, sustained carries of moderate loads. Observe elderly individuals in traditional Japanese communities and you'll notice something. They carry things, not heavy weights like in a gym, but bags of groceries, baskets of vegetables from the garden, containers of water for plants. And they carry them slowly, they carry them for distance. This is fundamentally different from what happens in modern Western life, where we use shopping carts, delivery services, and automotive transportation to eliminate nearly all carrying from daily existence. Research from the biomechanics department at the University of Pittsburgh has shown that loaded carrying activates muscle groups throughout the entire body in a way that few other activities match. The grip, the forearms, the shoulders, the postural muscles of the spine, the core, the hips, the legs, everything works together. But more importantly, slow carrying with moderate loads has remarkable effects on bone density. According to studies from researchers affiliated with Harvard Medical School, activities that involve carrying loads stimulate osteoblast activity, the cells responsible for building new bone, in ways that walking alone simply does not achieve. For someone in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, maintaining bone density is not optional. It is essential. A hip fracture after the age of 70 is associated with dramatically increased mortality rates in the following year. You don't need heavy weights. You need consistency. Carrying your groceries from the car, carrying a watering can around the garden, carrying a moderate bag while walking in your neighborhood. These small daily loads communicate to your skeleton that it needs to remain strong, and your skeleton listens. Now, before we continue to our top two movements, and I promise you, these final two are where this becomes truly fascinating, I want to take a moment. I'm curious about something. Where in the world are you watching from, and what is your age? Leave a comment below and tell me. I read these comments, and it's genuinely meaningful to understand who is finding value in this information. And if you're learning something new today, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps more people discover content like this. Let's continue. Number 2, daily reaching and stretching above the head. This might seem minor at first, but I assure you it is anything but. One of the most significant and underappreciated aspects of aging is the gradual loss of shoulder mobility. It happens slowly, so slowly that most people don't notice until they suddenly realize they can no longer reach the top shelf. They can't put on a coat without discomfort. They struggle to wash their own hair properly. In Western clinical practice, we see this pattern constantly. Frozen shoulder, rotator cuff deterioration, chronic shoulder impingement. These conditions affect millions of adults over the age of 60. But in populations where overhead reaching is maintained as part of daily life, hanging laundry on high lines, reaching for items stored on shelves, traditional stretching practices like radio taiso, which has been performed by millions of Japanese citizens for nearly a century, shoulder problems are dramatically less common. Research conducted at Tokyo Medical University found that elderly individuals who maintained regular overhead reaching patterns showed 40% less decline in shoulder range of motion compared to sedentary counterparts over a 10-year period. 40%. That's the difference between independence and needing help with basic self-care. But here's what makes this especially important. Shoulder mobility is connected to thoracic spine mobility, the middle portion of your back. When your shoulders stiffen, your upper back follows. When your upper back stiffens, your breathing becomes restricted. When your breathing becomes restricted, cardiovascular efficiency declines. This is the cascade that no one talks about. It starts with not reaching overhead. It ends with diminished independence in ways that seem completely unrelated. Every single day, ideally multiple times per day, reach your arms above your head. Gently without pain, stretch toward the ceiling. Rotate your arms slowly. Maintain the range of motion that your body will otherwise inevitably lose. In Japan, this is embedded in morning routines across the country. In the West, we have largely forgotten it exists. And now, number 1. The movement that, in my professional opinion, is the single most important factor distinguishing those who maintain remarkable mobility into their 80s and 90s from those who do not. Slow, mindful walking with deliberate attention to each step. I know, it sounds almost too simple, almost disappointing. You might have expected some exotic technique or specialized exercise that requires training. But let me explain why this is so profound. In Japanese culture, there is a concept embedded in practices like Zen walking meditation, where attention is placed entirely on the act of walking itself. Each step is deliberate, each movement is conscious. The brain is engaged not in distraction, not in phones, not in rushing, not in thinking about destinations, but in the physical sensation of moving through space. Research from Stanford Center on Longevity has demonstrated that this form of mindful, slow walking activates regions of the brain associated with motor planning, spatial awareness, and executive function in ways that automatic, distracted walking does not. A longitudinal study from Kyoto University followed over 2,000 adults for 15 years and found that those who practiced regular contemplative walking showed significantly slower decline in both physical mobility and cognitive function. The researchers controlled for diet, exercise frequency, and socioeconomic status. The walking practice itself was independently predictive of better outcomes. Why? Because conscious, slow walking requires your brain and body to communicate in a fundamentally different way. You are asking your nervous system to pay attention, to refine movement, to remain present in the act of locomotion. And here's the connection that Western medicine missed for decades. Mobility decline in aging is not primarily a muscle problem. It is a brain problem. It is a nervous system problem. The communication pathways between your brain and your muscles become slower, less accurate, less coordinated over time. Mindful walking trains those pathways. It keeps them active. It reinforces them daily. 20 minutes of slow, deliberate walking each day, where you pay attention to how your foot strikes the ground, how your weight transfers, how your arms move, how your balance shifts, may be more valuable for long-term mobility than an hour on a treadmill while watching television. This is not meditation in a mystical sense. This is neuromuscular training disguised as simplicity, and it is profoundly effective. And so we arrive at the central message of everything I've shared with you today. In Western culture, we have developed an understanding of exercise that is fundamentally about intensity. We celebrate exhaustion. We value pain. We believe that if we're not sweating, if we're not breathless, if we're not pushing to absolute failure, then we're not making progress. And for certain goals, athletic performance, rapid body composition changes, that approach has its place. But for the goal that matters most, remaining mobile, independent, and cognitively sharp into advanced age, the evidence points in a completely different direction. The elderly Japanese individuals who move better at 80 than many Westerners do at 60 are not athletes. They didn't spend their lives in gyms. What they did consistently throughout their entire lives was move in natural, fundamental patterns. They squatted, they walked on varied terrain, they got up and down from the floor. They carried things, they reached overhead, and they walked with presence and attention. These are not exercises in the way we typically think of exercises. These are simply movements that humans were designed to perform and that modern Western life has systematically eliminated from our daily existence. The good news, and I want to leave you with this, is that it's not too late. Regardless of your current age or physical condition, your body retains remarkable capacity for adaptation. Start where you are. Modify what needs to be modified. Be patient. Be consistent. And recognize that independence in your later years is not a matter of luck. It is not predominantly genetic, despite what many people believe. It is the accumulated result of decisions made over time, small movements practiced regularly, neural pathways maintained rather than abandoned. The dignity of aging well, of being able to care for yourself, to move freely, to engage with the world on your own terms, that is something you can actively cultivate. Starting today, starting with these 6 movements, I'd like to hear from you now. Of the 6 movements we discussed today, which one surprised you the most? Which one are you going to start practicing first? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them, and your experiences matter. And remember, the goal is not perfection. The goal is consistency. Small movements, practiced daily for years and decades. That is how some 80-year-olds move better than people 20 years younger. That is the difference between aging and aging well. Thank you for watching.